and I don't understand why you're going to university if you're not going to read the books. Like, I don't understand. Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I am doing a book tag. I saw this tag on Breakeven Books channel and it sounded like a lot of fun. So it's the 10 book challenge. So this is where I list 10 books that have stayed with me in some way. I'm not going to take more than a few minutes to think about which ones, and I'm not going to think too hard, so I've already kind of gathered them and put them in a pile. They don't have to be like the right books or great books, works of literature, just ones that have affected me in some way. So some of these will be interesting, some of these will be obvious. Sorry if you hear Paw Patrol in the background. I have a sick child here today, and I was like, well, you know what? If I can't work, I can at least film this tag. She might pop in, and that's fine. So, the first book, which I didn't require any thought at all, and that was Watership Down. So, this book my dad used to read to me when I was a kid, like probably like 8 or 9, because, you know, it's not for kids, but, you know, it's about bunnies. And, you know, I absolutely love the story. The personification of the animals was really interesting. I didn't understand the political kind of aspect behind it or like the social kind of critique behind it, but I do now, and it makes it even better. The violence in the book was striking to me at the time, because I was surprised my dad, you know, was reading me this, because the rabbits pretty much tear themselves apart, you know, tear each other apart. And yeah, but I mean, this book, I've read it quite a few times. I haven't read it in the last probably 10 years, but I can't wait to read it to my daughters, and it's been a big part of my life, actually. So Watership Down, great book, by Richard Adams. The next book is House of Leaves, this big old beast. I have the cool, colorful edition. Now, this is a book that's special to me because my husband and I both read it. He doesn't read a lot of books at all. He's still kind of working his way through the second of my trilogy. So, you know, good for him though, you know. I think this book kind of will always stick with me because it was one of the first ones I read that had the kind of found text aspect to it, where, you know, it's supposedly like a real text, even though, you know, it isn't, but like that's like the mechanism behind it. And I really liked that. I love things that are kind of like weird and eccentric like this. You know, there's an addenda at the end that has a lot of really nice poetry in it that I really liked. I loved the format. I love that there's footnotes. I loved kind of the weird kind of crypticness of it, and I still really like it. I've only read it once. I keep meaning to reread it, but it's one of those books I'm like, well, I read it once, you know, maybe I'll just like leave it in my brain, but now I'll read it again someday. The next one is Old Rendering Plant by Wolfgang Hilbig. I can't remember. So I read this book in 2020, so it's a recent read. It's like almost a novella. It's very short. It's so freaking weird. It's so weird. It's about this guy who, when he was a kid, he used to hang around this abandoned rendering plant, and he's just like, the whole thing is about, you know, East and West Germany. It's got a lot of kind of political allegory in it, but at the same time, you're like, what the hell is this book even about? I also think it's funny because, so I lend my brother-in-law kind of like weird books that I think he will like, because he has kind of a similar taste in mine, and he freaking hates this book. So I think it's so funny. He's like, stinky old German factory. That's what he calls it. And I'm like, no, it's amazing. And he's like, no, it sucks. So, yeah. The next book, which shouldn't be a surprise given the name of my channel, and that is The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. So why do I like this book so much? Well, it has problematic elements, I admit. So does a lot of old literature, and I'm just going to say that out of the way. I understand that, and I think that reading it from a critical perspective nowadays is a way to learn from the past, and I think it still is valid. Anyway, the reason why I particularly like this book is because it sends me to nostalgia about university. So I re-identified with Quentin's sorrow, not the basis for it, but like his kind of malaise or his ennui almost in the book at age 19. I really kind of like identified with that kind of despair. Maybe I was depressed in university. I don't know. It was one of the first books I read that played with format in like as an older book, like as a classic book. So I found that really fascinating. It also sparked my love of using lines from other works in titles, not just in titles of my own books, but like in other books, but also like essays and stuff. So I guess it spurred my love of interesting book titles. If you don't know, the quote is from Macbeth. Yeah. So I really love when books, you know, use quotes from old literature in their titles. So that's where that came from. The next one is Dahlgren. I mentioned this on my sci-fi tag I did a while back by Samuel Delaney. Oh, this book. Honestly, this book is fantastic. It's weird. It's huge. It's layered. It's like intellectually stimulating while also really raw. And it's full of like sex and craziness. It raises so many points about a variety of things. And I can't even tell you what it's about. Like, it's been described as like a labyrinth of a book. And that makes a lot of sense because when you're reading it, you're like, I'm so lost, but at the same time, I know exactly where I am, and it's reading this book. And the prose is just fantastic. Like, if you haven't read any Samuel Delaney yet, and you're a sci-fi fan, I don't think you can call yourself a sci-fi fan. Sorry, that was rude. But no, honestly, Samuel Delaney's fantastic. I mean, don't start with Dahlgren. Maybe start with Babel 17 or Nova or something like that. But yeah. Anyway. The next one is John Irving's A Prayer for Owen Meany. So I read this book. I found it in my dad's bookshelf when I was a teenager, and I freaking fell in love with it. I haven't read anything else by John Irving. Or no, I did read another one, but I didn't really care for it. And then I started another one, and it lived in the back of my trunk as like my I'm Stranded on the Side of the Highway book for like years and years. Until my husband was like, why is this in here? And I'm just like, put it back. Anyway, so I haven't read this book probably in 15 years or so, since I was probably about 20. I'm afraid to, in case it kind of sucks. But the reason it stuck with me is because when it's kind of like another one of those, it started me off on something. And this was probably one of the first books I read that was like kind of like for adults. I guess I was probably 15 or so when I read it, that had like dark humor in it, that dealt with events that, you know, it wasn't like a strictly obvious plot. So anyway, it's about this kid that believes he's fated to die, but it's told from his best friend's perspective, and it's kind of like a Bildungsroman, but it's also like kind of a character study. I guess it kind of started my love of like character-driven novels. Also, the main event takes place on my birthday, which I always thought was kind of funny when I was a kid. Weird coincidence. But yeah, so will I read it again? I don't know. Maybe someday. The next one is Remainder by Tom McCarthy, which is a bizarre book about this guy who is he's like got some kind of trauma from this accident, and he's trying to recreate this moment before it happens, and he gets this money, and he like pays people to like do these repetitive tasks because he's trying to like recreate for himself this feeling that he can't get any other way than he thinks, other than like experiencing this exact moment in time again. It's just bizarre, and it's just the weirdest thing, and I just can't stop thinking about it. It's just an odd book. My sister read it too, and sometimes we just talk about it. The next one is Jurassic Park. I'm not going to show my Criterion collection again because I brag about that too much. Criterion, I keep calling it the Criterion collection. Oh my god, I did this the last time I talked about Jurassic Park. It is a Folio Society edition. Jesus. Okay, so Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. This is the first book I've talked about this before. This is the first book I've read that had swears in it. I was like maybe 9. I loved it. It scared the absolute shit out of me. I will say that despite Gennaro in the book being sexy, I liked what the movie did with Lex and Tim better. In the book, Lex, she's the girl, is the youngest and doesn't do much, where in the movie, we all know that Lex is the hacker and she's the eldest, and they actually give her a role. In the book, she's kind of just like this little girl. So I really liked kind of what the movie did, but the book, though, is still fantastic. I still love it. You know, Dr. Malcolm, though, in the book is all right, but, you know, Jeff Goldblum in the movie, so the best. So I think what I really like about this book is that it was the first kind of horror I read. It was the first book for adults I read, but it also spawned my favorite movie of all time, which is Jurassic Park. So there we go. I've got 2 left. So we've got Middlemarch by George Eliot, another beast. So I had to read this in university because I obviously took English, and unlike a lot of people, I actually read all the assigned reading in university because I thought it was important to do so, and I don't understand why you're going to university if you're not going to read the books. Like, I don't understand. Anyway, this book made me fall in love with Victorian domestic fiction. Middlemarch, as I've said, it's a beast, but it's an intricate beast. It's very, very, it's probably one of the best books ever written, I would argue, in terms of, like, the depth of not just the world, but the characters, and the plot is so nuanced. It's got this amazingly long, drawn out love story. That's not really a love story. It's more like I made a mistake, but I can't get divorced because it's the time period. And like, I don't know, it's just got so much to it. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff about reform and labor rights, things like that. I mean, George Eliot, she's amazing. And I really need to get back into Victorian literature. I haven't read one in a while, and that makes me very sad. I keep being distracted by all these sci-fis and NetGalleys. So I think I'm going to do like a classic, more like a classic literature September, something like that. The last one is also a domestic fiction, and it is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. I'd have to say she's probably my favorite writer from that time period. I also had to read this in university, and I absolutely loved it. It's domestic fiction, but it's also more of a political novel. It got me seriously hooked on the enemies to lovers trope when it comes to like romance subplots and stories, because I loved the dynamic the two had. And it's just it's just, I don't know. It's just such a deep book, but it's so easy to read, and it's a lot of fun. And I highly recommend it if you want to get into like the domestic fiction from the 1800s. Don't start with Middlemarch because it's a beast, but you know, this one's a good one. Also, you know, Jane Austen's easy too. There's a couple I wanted to mention. Now, Battle Royale I would have had on the list, but Eric already talked about it in his video, so check out his video because he and I share the exact same thoughts on this book. This book is amazing, and I love it. And then also, I wanted to do a short little special mention to Halo Evolutions. Because this book introduced me to Jeff Vandermeer, and he's one of my favorite writers. So I just wanted to be like, that's why I keep this book, because of his particular one little tiny chapter. I mean, it's not that long. It's actually pretty long. It's like a good 100 pages, but it's like, you know, but it's good. Just take it out. Anyway, thanks for watching. What are some of the books that have stayed with you guys over the course of your life? Like, there's some other ones that I thought about. Like, there was like some kids books that really sat with me. There's one called the Wishing Tree. I can't remember the name. There's one called Absolutely Normal Chaos that I loved when I was like 9, but I was like, I'm not gonna talk about middle grade fiction. But yeah, let me know if any what your guys' picks are. And yeah, sorry again for Paw Patrol if you can hear that in the background. Yeah.